There is a moment in every deal that tells you everything you need to know about the person sitting across the table from you. Not the handshake at the beginning. Not the celebration at the end. The moment in the middle. The moment when the pressure is highest and the money is largest and every person in the room is leaning forward waiting for the pen to move. That is the moment that reveals character. And on a day that nobody in Hollywood saw coming, in a room full of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry, Keanu Reeves picked up the contract that was sitting in front of him. He looked at it. He looked at the people who had put it there. The executives and the lawyers and the producers who had spent months assembling this deal, who had flown in from different cities, who had cleared their calendars and reserved the conference room and ordered the expensive lunch that nobody touched because everyone was too focused on what was about to happen. He looked at all of them. And he put the pen down. He did not sign. And the most powerful man in Hollywood, a man who had never in his professional life been told no by anyone who wanted to keep working, sat back in his chair and did not say a single word. Because he did not know what to say. Because this had never happened before. Because in 30 years of making deals and breaking people and building an empire that stretched across every corner of the entertainment world, nobody had ever looked at what he was offering and decided it was not enough. Nobody until Keanu Reeves. This is that story. The story of the contract nobody thought he would refuse. The story of the room that went silent. The story of what happens when the one person Hollywood cannot figure out does the one thing Hollywood cannot prepare for. Stay with me. Because by the time this is over, you are going to understand something about Keanu Reeves that most people never get close to. Something that explains not just this moment but everything, every strange choice, every unexpected decision, every time he did the thing that made the industry shake its head and the rest of the world fall a little more in love with him. You are going to understand why he is the way he is. And why Hollywood has never been able to change it. To understand what happened in that room, you have to understand what Hollywood actually is underneath all the glamour and the lights and the premieres and the magazine covers. Hollywood is a machine. Not a metaphor for a machine. An actual, functioning, precisely calibrated machine designed to do one thing and do it with extraordinary efficiency. It takes human beings and it turns them into products. This sounds harsh. It is meant to. Because the people who run that machine are not harsh about it, they are matter of fact about it. They will tell you, if you ask them directly, that this is simply how it works. That this is the business. That an actor is a brand and a brand has to be managed and managing a brand means controlling the narrative and controlling the narrative means controlling the person. You sign the contracts they put in front of you. You take the meetings they schedule. You wear what they tell you to wear and say what they tell you to say and be seen with the people they want you to be seen with and not seen with the people they want you to avoid. You become what they need you to become. In exchange, they make you famous. They make you wealthy. They put your face on billboards in 40 countries and your name above the title of films that hundreds of millions of people will watch and your voice in the cultural conversation in a way that would be impossible without the machine. It is a transaction. It has always been a transaction. And for most actors, for almost every actor who has ever walked through the doors of a major studio, the transaction is worth it. Because the machine offers something that almost nobody can resist. It offers to make you matter. And Keanu Reeves, when he first arrived in Hollywood, was not immune to that offer. He was young. He had grown up moving around, never quite settling, never quite belonging. Born in Beirut. Raised partly in Sydney, partly in New York, partly in Toronto. A father who left when he was 3 years old and appeared only occasionally after that, unreliably, like a guest who had not quite decided whether to stay. A mother who loved him but was building her own life in the complicated, improvisational way that single mothers build lives when the plan they had does not work out. He did not have stability. He did not have a blueprint. What he had was something harder to name and more durable, a quality of presence, a stillness, an ability to be fully in a room without filling it with noise. And he had the face. The specific, unusual, difficult to categorize face that the camera loved in a way that the camera only loves certain faces. Not classically handsome in the way that central casting understood. Something stranger and more interesting than that. He got work. Small parts first, then bigger ones. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure made him recognizable. Point Break made him a different kind of recognizable. Speed made him a star. And then the machine started paying very close attention. The machine's attention is not always a comfortable thing. When you are small enough that it has not noticed you yet, you have a kind of freedom. You make choices based on what interests you, what challenges you, what feels true. You take the weird role in the independent film because you find it compelling. You work with the first-time director because their vision excites you. You say yes to things that the machine, if it were paying attention, would tell you to say no to. But once the machine has decided you are valuable, the calculus changes. Suddenly there are people around you whose job it is to protect your value. Agents and managers and publicists and studio executives and producers who have all, in various ways, invested in what you are becoming and who need that investment to pay off. And what pays off, in Hollywood's understanding of the world, is very specific. You take the franchise. You build the brand. You become the reliable, bankable, predictable thing that studios can plan their release schedules around. You become the name that opens movies in 40 countries. You become, in the language of the industry, a sure thing. And in exchange for becoming a sure thing, you surrender something. Not obviously. Not all at once. Not in any single dramatic moment that you can point to and say that is where it happened. But gradually. In the accumulation of small decisions made by other people on your behalf. In the slow replacement of what you wanted with what was strategically optimal. This is what the machine does to almost everyone. Almost everyone. Keanu Reeves did something in the 1990s that still gets talked about in Hollywood in a particular tone of voice. Not quite admiration. Not quite disbelief. Something in between. He turned down money. Not small money. Not the kind of money that is easy to turn down because it is not actually that much. The kind of money that makes financial advisors go quiet and studio executives get confused and agents start asking if everything is okay. He passed on Speed 2. The sequel to the film that had made him a genuine movie star. The film that had put him on a different level. The logical, obvious, machine-approved next step was Speed 2. More of the thing that worked. More visibility. More of the currency that Hollywood trades in. He said no. The studio offered more money. He said no again. The studio offered significantly more money, the kind of number that was meant to communicate that this was not a negotiation anymore, this was a statement of how much they valued him. He said no. He said no because he had read the script and he thought it was not good enough. That was it. That was the whole reason. Not a strategic calculation about brand positioning or franchise fatigue or the risk of overexposure. Not a power play to extract better terms. Just a man who had read something and decided it did not meet the standard he had set for himself. In Hollywood, this was incomprehensible. The machine does not operate on the logic of good enough. The machine operates on the logic of what sells. And Speed 2 would have sold. Regardless of whether the script was brilliant or mediocre or genuinely terrible, Speed 2 with Keanu Reeves would have made money. The machine knew this. The machine could not understand why he did not know this. But Keanu Reeves was operating on a different logic entirely. He was operating on the logic of a person who had decided, somewhere along the way, that the thing he did for a living was supposed to mean something. That the roles he took were supposed to be worth taking. That the transaction with the audience, the agreement that when they bought a ticket and sat in the dark and gave him 2 hours of their attention, that transaction had an obligation attached to it. The obligation to give them something real. Speed 2 did not feel real to him. So he did not do it. And Hollywood looked at him and did not know what to do. The contract that changed everything came later. By then, Keanu Reeves was not just a movie star. He was something more specific and more complicated than that. The Matrix had happened. Not just a film but a cultural event. A film that rewired the way people thought about reality and identity and what it meant to choose between the life you were living and the life you were capable of. A film that made Keanu Reeves something that very few actors ever become. A symbol. Neo was not just a character. He was an idea. The idea of the ordinary person who discovers they are extraordinary. The idea that the world you think you are living in might not be the world that is actually there. The idea that waking up, really waking up, to what is real and what is possible, requires more courage than almost anything else. Keanu Reeves played that idea. And he played it so completely, so fully, with such physical and emotional commitment, that for a generation of people watching in darkened theaters, he and the idea became the same thing. After The Matrix, Hollywood wanted more of him than it had ever wanted before. The offers that came in were not just large. They were extraordinary. Numbers that rewrote the conversation about what an actor could earn. Franchises that wanted his name attached to guarantee their viability. Projects that would have been impossible to get made without his involvement and suddenly became possible the moment he was connected to them. And in the middle of all of this, in the peak of his market value, at the moment when the machine would have signed anything he put in front of it, he did something that the machine is still processing. He gave the money away. Not all of it. Not in a single gesture. But in a pattern of behavior that once you start looking at it is consistent and deliberate and impossible to explain through any lens that Hollywood normally uses to understand human motivation. He gave a significant portion of his Matrix earnings to the special effects and costume departments. The people who built the world he inhabited on screen. The people whose names appear at the end of the credits in the section where most audiences have already stood up to leave. He gave them Harley-Davidson motorcycles. He gave them bonuses that in some cases exceeded what they had earned on the entire production. Why? That is the question Hollywood keeps asking about Keanu Reeves. Why? Why would you do that? What is the strategic benefit? What does it earn you? What is the calculation? And the answer that Hollywood cannot process is that there was no calculation. He did it because they had worked hard and he thought they deserved it and he had enough and they had less and the math seemed obvious. That is it. That is the whole reason. No calculation. No strategy. No brand management. No publicist who suggested it would generate positive press. Just a man who looked at the people around him and thought about what was fair and then did the fair thing. In Hollywood, this is not how things work. In Hollywood, this is not how anyone works. The room where the contract sat unsigned was on the 14th floor of a building in Century City. The man at the head of the table had been in the industry for longer than some of the junior executives in the room had been alive. He had made careers and ended careers. He had taken unknown actors and made them household names and taken household names and made them unemployable. He had developed a specific, carefully maintained reputation as someone who did not lose. He did not lose negotiations. He did not lose casting battles. He did not lose the war of attrition that major studio deals eventually become, when both sides are tired and one side blinks first. He did not lose. The contract on the table was the culmination of 8 months of discussions. It was a deal that would have tied Keanu Reeves to a specific studio, a specific franchise, a specific set of obligations for a specific number of years. It was generous in the financial terms. It was clear in what it required. What it required, underneath all the legal language and the compensation structures and the scheduling provisions, was control. Control over what projects he could take. Control over what he could say publicly about certain topics. Control over the image that went out into the world under his name. Control over the version of Keanu Reeves that the public saw. It was not unusual. This is what these contracts do. They are not hiding anything. They are simply written in the language that Hollywood speaks fluently, which is the language of asset management. And the asset being managed, in this contract, was a person. Keanu Reeves read the contract. He read it carefully. He is known for reading things carefully. For taking the time that other people in his position do not take, because they have people who read things for them and summarize and advise and tell them what to think. Keanu Reeves reads his own contracts. He read this one. And when he was finished, he looked up from the pages and he looked at the man at the head of the table and he said something that nobody in that room had prepared for. He said, "I am not going to sign this. Not I need more money. Not I need different terms. Not let me take this back to my people and we will come back to you next week. I am not going to sign this." The room went very quiet. The man at the head of the table had a very specific physical response to hearing things he did not expect. He went still. Not the stillness of calm. The stillness of something being contained. A stillness that people who knew him understood to mean that what was happening on the surface was not what was happening underneath. He said, "I am sorry, what did you say?" And Keanu Reeves said it again. What happened in the next hour has been described by people who were in that room. Not on the record. Not in interviews. In the way that things get described in Hollywood, which is quietly, between people who trust each other, in restaurants and on phone calls, and in the particular kind of conversation that happens when someone needs to process something they have not been able to make sense of. The man at the head of the table tried everything he knew. He tried money first. Because money is almost always first. He put a different number on the table. A larger number. A number that was meant to communicate that the previous number had not been a ceiling, it had been an opening. That there was more where that came from. That the value being placed on Keanu Reeves was essentially limitless if he would simply pick up the pen. Keanu Reeves said it is not about the money. The man at the head of the table did not have a quick response to this. Because in his experience, it was always about the money. Even when people said it was not about the money, it was about the money. The not about the money statement was a negotiating position, a way of signaling that the number needed to move further before the conversation could proceed. He moved the number further. Keanu Reeves said, "I understand. But I am still not going to sign this." The room shifted. The junior executives who had been sitting quietly along the walls, taking notes, staying invisible, exchanged glances that were too small to be noticed but were noticed anyway. Because something was happening that did not happen. That was outside the normal parameters of how these meetings went. The man at the head of the table tried something different. He talked about what the deal meant. Not for Keanu Reeves' finances, but for his legacy. For his place in the culture. For the films that could be made, the stories that could be told, the scale of the thing that was being offered. He was good at this. He had used this argument many times and it almost always worked, because the thing that actors want, underneath all the money and the fame, is to matter. To leave something. To be the person whose work people still watch in 50 years. He laid it out. The scope of it. The reach of it. The opportunity of it. And Keanu Reeves listened. He listened the way he listens to everything, which is completely, without interrupting, without preparing his response while the other person is still speaking. And when the man was finished, Keanu Reeves said something that ended the meeting. He said, "I know what you are offering. I understand what it is worth. And I am telling you that what you are asking for in return is worth more than that to me." He stood up. He thanked the people in the room for their time. And he left. There is a word that gets used to describe what Keanu Reeves did in that room and in the other rooms like it throughout a career full of moments like that one. The word is integrity. It is a word that gets used so often that it has started to lose its shape. It has been applied to so many people in so many situations that it has become a kind of all-purpose compliment, vague and unthreatening and easy to say. But integrity has a specific meaning. A technical meaning, almost. The way it is used in engineering and architecture, where it refers to the structural wholeness of a thing. The quality of being uncompromised. The quality of holding together under pressure. A structure has integrity when it does not bend in ways it was not designed to bend. When the forces that are applied to it, the weight, the stress, the pressure from outside, do not change what it fundamentally is. Keanu Reeves has integrity in this specific, structural sense. The forces that Hollywood applies to actors are enormous. The money is enormous. The pressure is enormous. The fear of losing it, the career, the fame, the access, the version of yourself that only exists because the machine is running, that fear is enormous. And most actors bend. Not because they are weak. Not because they have no values. But because the forces are very large and the bending happens gradually, and by the time you realize what has happened you are so far from where you started that you cannot quite remember the original shape of the thing. Keanu Reeves did not bend. Not because he is superhuman. Not because he does not feel the pressure. Not because the money does not matter or the fame does not feel good or the fear does not visit him in the moments between certainty. But because somewhere early in his life, he made a decision about what he was not willing to trade away. And he has not traded it. Through everything that has happened to him, the career highs and the career lows, the critical dismissals and the cultural resurrections, the personal tragedies that would have broken most people and did not break him, the offers and the contracts and the rooms full of powerful people, through all of it, he has held on to the thing he decided not to trade. Himself. The personal tragedies are part of this story. Not as a way of explaining him. Not as a way of making sense of the choices through the lens of pain, which is a reductive thing to do to any human being. But because they are real and they happened and they are part of who he is and what he knows. His best friend River Phoenix died in 1993. Outside a nightclub in Los Angeles, on a sidewalk, at 23 years old. Keanu Reeves was 28. He had watched his friend, who was in many ways the most gifted actor of their generation, disappear into the things that Hollywood offers young men who are too valuable too fast and not prepared for what that means. He watched and he could not stop it, and then it was over. His daughter was stillborn in 1999. With his then girlfriend Jennifer Syme. A daughter he had wanted, had been expecting, had prepared himself to love. Gone before he could meet her. 18 months later, Jennifer Syme was killed in a car accident. These are not things you recover from in the way that recovery is usually understood. You do not process them and file them away and return to the person you were before they happened. They become part of you. They change the shape of what you know about the world and what you believe about the time you have and what matters and what does not. Keanu Reeves knows things about loss that most people spend their whole lives hoping not to learn. And that knowledge, that specific, hard-won, irreversible knowledge, has something to do with the man who sits in the contract meetings and puts the pen down. Because when you have lost the things that cannot be replaced, the things that can be replaced look different. Money looks different. Fame looks different. The offer of more of those things, in exchange for the thing that is actually you, looks different. It looks like the wrong trade. He rides motorcycles. This sounds like a small detail. It is not a small detail. He co-founded a motorcycle company. Not as an investment. Not as a vanity project with his name on the letterhead while other people do the actual work. He goes in. He sits with the engineers. He rides the prototypes. He has opinions about the machines that come from actual knowledge earned through actual experience. He does the thing. The actual thing, not the celebrity version of the thing. This is consistent across everything he does. When he was preparing for John Wick, he trained. Not the amount of training that generates good publicity photographs. The amount of training that allows you to actually do the sequences at the speed and precision the film requires. He became, through genuine work and genuine commitment, someone who could do what the character did. Because he believed the audience deserved to see the real thing. Because the transaction with the audience has an obligation attached to it. He has said in interviews, in the quiet, considered way he says things, that he thinks about death. That mortality is something he lives with consciously, not as a source of fear but as a kind of calibration. A way of keeping the important things important and the unimportant things in their proper place. When you think about death, really think about it, not as an abstract far-off event but as something real and present and coming. The contract that the most powerful man in Hollywood puts in front of you looks like what it is. A piece of paper. A piece of paper that is asking you to trade something that cannot be bought back for something that will not matter when the time comes that nothing matters. He put the pen down. He said no. And he walked out of that room the same person he walked in. Hollywood did not destroy Keanu Reeves. This is the part of the story that the industry has had the hardest time processing. Because Hollywood destroys people. It has done it consistently, reliably, for 100 years. Not maliciously, most of the time. Not with intention. But as a byproduct of the machine's operation. The machine processes human beings and the processing leaves marks and the marks accumulate and eventually the person who came in is not the person who remains. The machine expected to do this to Keanu Reeves. It was patient. It had time. It always has time, because it has been running longer than any individual career, longer than any individual person, and it knows that patience is its greatest advantage. It can wait. It can offer and withdraw and offer again. It can make things difficult and then easy and then difficult in a different way. It can apply pressure from so many different directions simultaneously that you do not even feel any single force pushing you, you just feel, gradually, that you have moved. The machine applied all of this to Keanu Reeves. And he did not move. He is still the person who gives the stunt team his bonus. Who sits on the subway without a bodyguard because he does not think he needs one. Who stops when fans approach him and is actually present in those moments, not performing presence but actually there, actually looking at the person, actually hearing them. Who gives away enough money that it has changed the lives of people whose names most audiences will never know. He is still that person. After everything the machine tried. After every contract and every meeting and every room full of powerful people who needed him to be something other than what he is. He is still that person. And Hollywood, which has seen everything, which thought it had seen everything, is still not quite sure what to do with him. There is something that people who have worked with Keanu Reeves describe again and again. Not the kindness, though they describe that too. Not the generosity, though that comes up constantly. Something more specific. They describe the quality of his attention. The way he looks at you when you are talking to him. The way the rest of the room seems to disappear and the conversation you are having becomes the only conversation that is happening anywhere. The way he remembers things, not just your name, but the specific thing you said, the specific detail, the thing you mentioned once and assumed he had not registered because famous people usually do not register the things the less famous people say. He registers. He remembers. He is present in a way that is genuinely rare and that becomes, when you have experienced it, the thing you find yourself thinking about afterward. Not because it is impressive. Because it makes you feel like you matter. A camera operator who worked on one of his films tells the story of a conversation they had during a break in shooting. A real conversation, about real things, the kind that does not happen between stars and crew unless something unusual is going on. He remembers the conversation. He says it changed something small but real in how he understood his work. Keanu Reeves probably does not remember him specifically. There have been too many conversations with too many people over too many years. But the camera operator remembers. And that memory, the memory of being seen by someone who did not have to see you, is the thing he carries. That is what Keanu Reeves leaves behind him. Not films, although the films are there. Not a brand, although the brand exists whether he wants it to or not. But the particular, personal, impossible to manufacture quality of having been genuinely present with another human being. The machine does not know how to sell this. The machine does not know how to replicate it. The machine does not, if we are being honest, quite understand it. The most powerful man in Hollywood did not stay silent forever. In the weeks after the meeting, he talked about it. In the way that people in Hollywood talk about things, which is carefully and with layers of meaning that require some decoding. He said that Keanu Reeves was an unusual talent. He said that he respected the decision even if he did not understand it. He said that the door remained open. What he did not say, but what the people who know him understand, is that the meeting had unsettled him in a way that meetings do not usually unsettle him. Because the man at the head of the table had built his entire career on understanding what people want. On being better than anyone else at identifying the desire and offering the thing that satisfies it. At reading the room and the person and the moment and knowing exactly which lever to pull. He could not read Keanu Reeves. Not because Keanu Reeves is complicated. Actually for the opposite reason. Because Keanu Reeves is unusually simple, in the specific sense that his actions follow directly from his values without the mediation of strategy or calculation or the constant self-monitoring that makes most people in his position difficult to read. He does not want what the machine offers. Not enough to trade what the machine asks for in return. That is the whole thing. That is the complete explanation. And for the most powerful man in Hollywood, who has spent 30 years trading in desire and leverage and the gap between what people want and what they are willing to do to get it, the complete explanation is the most disorienting thing he has ever encountered in a negotiation. Because you cannot negotiate with someone who genuinely does not want what you have. You cannot leverage someone who has already decided what they are not willing to trade. You cannot find the pressure point in a person who has, through loss and clarity and the particular wisdom that comes from knowing exactly what matters and what does not, become pressure-proof. The most powerful man in Hollywood was left speechless. Not because Keanu Reeves is powerful, but because Keanu Reeves is free. And in a room full of people who have spent their careers accumulating power, freedom is the one thing that none of them thought to want. The one thing none of them have. The contract sat on the table unsigned. The pen stayed where he put it. The room that had never gone quiet before went quiet. And Keanu Reeves walked out into the Los Angeles afternoon, got on his motorcycle, and went home. No press release. No strategic announcement. No carefully managed narrative about standing up to the system. Just a man who knew what he was worth and what he was not willing to trade and acted accordingly. Hollywood is still talking about it. They probably will be for a while. Because they still have not figured out what to do with someone they cannot buy. And they are starting to wonder if they ever will.